Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tik Tok podcast. Today we have a special guest, Coach Patrick Taylor, and we're excited to get into this episode. We have no clue what we're going to talk about.
Nope.
We didn't even make a layout or anything, so Aaron, give us something.
Let's talk about your when you would run your squirrels with dogs. Cause I ain't never heard any stories from that.
It's a funny tale. When I was younger, I had coon hounds, and living in Georgia with the swamps, and you had a little bit of everything to hunt, especially where I lived in Middle Georgia. To the south of us, we called it the alligator line. On the south part of our county was alligators in the swamps, and up the northern part of the county and up in that part of Georgia, you didn't have to deal with that as much. And when I was younger and I was married and had two little girls, staying out till 3 or 4 in the morning when a dog wouldn't come back, or and having to get up and go to work the next morning, it made it tough to go to work, but it also made it tough to be home sometimes, because you would go in the wintertime as soon as it got dark, and you might cut loose till midnight or whenever. And so that got to be a little tough. And the problem with the breed, I did a lot of competition coonhound hunting, which a lot of people that's never been around it don't know that there's money to be won now. There's a lot of things to be done. They bred those dogs to be competition dogs, and they were made to go find the hottest track, and that's beneficial if you're in a competition hunt, because you only got 2 hours inside that hunt to tree as many coons as you can. And with that being the case, I just kind of fell out of love with it, and so I had an uncle, Raymond Smith, who I think he passed away a couple years ago, and he always had coonhounds or squirrel dogs. And I used to get up on his lap when I was little, and we would read a magazine called Full Cry. It was a magazine that was printed out of Illinois that was made for the tree dog enthusiast. And I remember crawling up on his lap, and he would thumb through those pages while I was drinking his coffee. And when I got some time and got out of coonhounds for a while, I quit hunting for a couple of years there in Georgia. I didn't hunt at all. I had a neighbor. Actually, a friend from church, his dad called me and said, "Hey, guy next door to me has got 2 squirrel dogs that he's got to get rid of because he's getting too old, and won't know if you'd want them." And I didn't know the guy from Adam. And so I went over there, and one of them was a blackmouth cur, which are the type of dogs that are really, really famous in Louisiana. They're all different colors, but if you've seen the movie Old Yeller, he was a blackmouth cur. They were a yellow dog, and they have a black tinge around their mouth, and sometimes they can be different colors also. But I got Pete, and Pete came home, and I got another little Feist, which is a smaller version of a squirrel dog that they used to hunt, and I piqued my curiosity into squirrel hunting. And the thing about Pete is Pete would, if you took him out at night, he'd treat a coon. If you took him in the daytime, he'd treat a squirrel. And it was fun because those dogs hunt for you. And that was one of the things that I've seen in my later years, moving into more of a small dog capacity. These dogs don't get bigger than 30 pounds, and they're a little bit bigger than maybe a tall beagle. So they can be an inside dog. They can
like
be a
what
lot.
You got now?
Yeah, it can be an inside dog, a lot dog. It can be whatever you need. You can have a dog box. You don't need a dog box. And with him, he always stayed true to a breed called the Stevens cur, and that's what I have. And the last 2 dogs I've had has come out of his stock, and he has a son that's still hunting them quite often. But they came from a guy named Hugh Stevens, who basically in southeastern Kentucky decided to keep the breed going. What a lot of people don't know about these dogs is, if you read in the old memoirs of Appalachia and through North Carolina and Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, the settlers brought these dogs with them to settle the mountains. And so you take like my Stevens cur, in the eastern part of North Carolina, they treat black bear with them. You got some that treat coon. You got some that's a squirrel dog. They hunt big game cat out west with them. And even in Georgia, to a point now, right before I left 15 years ago, they were training them to track bloodshed deer. In both
I was about
seasons.
to say, was it similar to the dogs that'll track deer?
Yep.
Because that's big now.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. These cur dogs, whatever you start them on, is what they're going to be on. Yeah. And that's one of the great things about them. And they are a dog that hunts for you. Yeah. They want to please you, and they have the most peculiar personalities. But as I went through, and I also think about getting into hunting. All of us know that if you got to go out and buy a high-powered rifle, a scope, the optics, your stands, a lot of things that you need, the garments that you need.
Find the property.
Yeah, it takes a lot. And the thing I've always said about squirrel hunting is you can, squirrel and coon hunting especially to a point, you can find a dog. You don't have to have, my first dog box I made out of plywood, and I had a diamond plate one at some point in time. For a long time I hunted without a tracking system, and sometimes you'll see a lot of tracking systems now. It's got GPS on. That's kind of the standard now. But honestly, if you've got a dog and a 22 single shot, a good pellet gun, I hunt with a Red Label Winchester 16 gauge. It was made in the 40s. And that's, so if you got a shotgun, you can take a youth hunting. And one of the things that was better for me is when I was younger, sitting in a stand, and my ADHD just tore me up too much. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. And the kids up there fidgeting, and they're figuring out maybe their first taste of hunting is having to sit here and wait. And that's there's some great things, because you got to have patience to be a good hunter. But when you turn them loose with a dog, you can take a young kid out. They don't have to be covered in camouflage. You can walk through the woods, and they can look at things and see things, and you letting the dog do the work. And that dog is like a detective. If you learn to listen to him, he's going to tell you everything that he's doing, whether the track is hot, whether it's cold. The last one I had before little Jill, she was a little feist, and if you missed when you were shooting the squirrel, she would look at you, and she'd stay on the tree, and she'd look over at you like, "Are you going to shoot this thing out to me, or am I going to have to climb up there and get it?" And the funny thing, my wife didn't grow up around hunting, and she and my two daughters would go walk the woods with me, and they found a greater appreciation for what that dog was willing to do for us. If I always say, if Y2K would have happened, or we're going this big, internet shutdown with the grid, I got a dog in my backyard that would go kill me something, or go take me to something to kill. And, a lot of people don't eat squirrel and coon and stuff like that no more, but
squirrel's delicious.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that used to cook it, but at the end of the day, there's so many things about those dogs that we've lost in history, because we don't, this is not a frontier world anymore.
Yeah.
But those dogs were a pivotal part of moving westward into the mountains of Kentucky and Tennessee, and on over into the Arkansas and the Midwest. If you read, one of the things is, if you read George Washington's memoirs, he talks about having a cur and a feist, and how much he loved his little feist dog that he used. And so that's one of the things, they've been brought over from the beginning of the United States. And what's sad now is you pull up to very few gas stations or anywhere, just mom and pop stores, and you don't see many dog boxes in the back of trucks. When I was teaching at a high school here local, I took a couple of kids squirrel hunting one time, and it just kind of amazed them that, hey, this dog's out here doing this for you. And I'm like, yeah, it's fun. But
that's what the dog. If it's bred to do that, it's like a retriever.
Yeah,
it's bred. You throw something, it's gonna go get it. It's like that's what they enjoy. And it was like like you'd use to hunt waterfowl with.
Yeah,
like that dog is bred to go get it, and that's what it enjoys doing. If it's not doing that, it's not happy.
One of the funniest things that I can remember hunting young is we were hunting down in some Weyerhaeuser land in Georgia, and it was along a swamp, and we treated coon in the top, and we had some young dogs, and once the old dogs kind of got a taste for it, they didn't have to have one in their mouth, but we had some young puppies, and they had treed with it, and my buddy said, hey, go up there and leash them back, and leash the old dogs back, and we'll leave those young dogs underneath the tree, and we'll cut them loose and let them fight the coon. And I was like, all right. So I'm underneath the tree, and I get the dogs leashed back, and I hear the crack of a shot, and I've got some of those young dogs unpinned, and some of them still hooked up, and I hear the crack of a shot, and then I start hearing limbs breaking. And about the time I looked up, there was a coon hit me right square in the side of the face. And it scratched me down side of my face and down my neck. When I got home, my wife thought I'd been in some kind of bar fight or something, because, it looked like somebody had scratched me. But, the thing about it is when you see how gritty those dogs are, to take a 35-pound dog and tree a 250-pound black bear, they're not they're not going to back down 1 inch. I mean,
black bears scare the dog most of the time.
Most of the time.
So, even hunting cougar out west, and
those cats could eat them things up.
Yeah,
and they're not going to back down. But that's one of the things. Like when we talked about the thing about the difference is. About those coon hounds and stuff, a lot of these curs, they have competition hunts for them, but a lot of these old men, they stay real close to their breeding line and they breed them to hunt for pleasure. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I want to take a dog out for a couple of hours and enjoy the woods and enjoy seeing things in the woods that you necessarily maybe never gonna see if you're not around, and being able to let that dog work and hear him tree and wait for you to get there.
I'd love to experience that because I've never done any hunting with dogs of any kind.
We'll have to get a video together and
that
go
would be
do it.
great.
Yeah.
My papa, he used to run dogs he used to tree coons, and I think they would do it some in competition.
Yep.
But that's what he grew up, and I've never done it.
I mean, it is like a lost art, pretty much.
It is. Nobody does it anymore.
Because a lot of people a long time ago in the 20s, they fur hunted.
Yeah.
And you would have coon hunters getting, $5-10 of a fur. And same thing with, most of your fishing lures. They use deer hair.
Really?
Or they use squirrel hair.
For bucktails and stuff.
Yeah, bucktail jigs and stuff like that. And even in the pinstriping industry, when people used to, instead of using tape pinstripe on cars, when they used to hand do the lettering and hand do all that was a squirrel hair brush, because the squirrel hair would get real fine when you dipped it in paint, and it would get like a very pinpoint to it. And now there's not much call for it. And like I said, nobody. My wife would never eat a squirrel if you fried it up. But at my uncle's house, it was a good idea that you were gonna have squirrel, you were gonna have a barbecue coon for supper. And I mean, he told me about times in Kentucky when he was growing up that there were no coons to tree. I mean, and the deer was very scarce, and you very rarely saw a turkey. And we've seen all these federations come along, and one of the things I've always said, in Georgia, we would always hear, well, if dogs are coming through, then a lot of times it might scare the other wildlife. And there's been many times at night we were walking through the woods and the dog had already been past where we were walking, and we would jump the deer.
Yeah.
And the deer would jump. We would jump them coming in with our lights and walking through. The deer had been the dog had been long through there. And that's not always the case. But like my dogs and the breed that I hunt, they're not all perfect. But I let my dogs see the deer on the front porch.
Yeah.
I let them see it and let them see that, it's not something you can kill or catch, and it's not something I'm going to go after.
Yeah.
And so that's helped out quite a bit about breaking them. But I've never had to put a shocking collar on them to light them up for doing it.
Really?
A lot of times I'll say, nope, that's not it. And that's kind of the thing that I've been lucky, knock on wood. But I've been with some that, if they got across, I've been with some coon hounds. If they got on the deer scent, boys, you pick them up in the next county. Because it was just part of the deal, and that's kind of why I got out of it.
It's amazing to me. You talk about how the dog run right past the deer, and you jump the deer. It's amazing to me how deer can sense what's a threat and what's not. Like if you're standing out here, sitting on your front porch and there's deer out there, probably don't pay you no mind. But the second that I walk out there in camo, sneaking, not talking, they're gone. And it's it's one thing, they smell humans here. And this is one of our property owners, by the way. So that's why we're all in camo. We just got done hunting here, but we these deer, because there's houses on either side of these woods, so they smell humans all the time, but they can identify. They see you out here and they smell you and they say, okay, that's him. And nothing to worry about.
That's the human that killed my brother last year.
But they smell me out there, they can't identify it. So that's like they start blowing or they start stomping. And I've always, I wondered about it for years. It's like, if these deer are smelling humans, even I've hunted some urban areas like close to Greensboro. My mama had a property, and I know they smelled humans all day long. But I hunted it one time, and I didn't even see them, and they winded me, and they were gone. It's like, but they recognized that that's a threat versus my mama sitting on the front porch or out, watering the grass. That's not a threat. And it's just amazing to me. We don't give animals enough credit, whether it be dogs, deer, any animal.
You don't. It's crazy when you talk about it, even the flip side on like squirrels. one of the hardest things to find is when your dog has treed one, and then they're in the top of a poplar or oak tree, and they'll flatten out right up against the tree to where you really have to get up in there and scan your eyes to find that little knot or that little nudge until you can find him. And we don't, because like you said, I drive up and down my driveway and the deer just look at
you. Yeah.
And I've walked out on the back porch and just, they'd be 10, 15 feet away from me underneath a pear tree, and I'm just going, what in the world are you doing? It almost startle you.
Yeah.
And like you said, they got a dryer vent they can smell. They got all these smells that they can smell. And then I think sometimes when they're not used to in that proximity, of how close it is, and a buddy of mine that I coon hunted with for a long time in Georgia, he's an avid deer hunter too. And he swore 10 years ago that deer had gotten to the point where they started to look up.
Yeah. Yes.
Into a tree.
I've noticed that.
They will do that.
Because they've been shot at so much, or they're starting to, now when they eat, they're scanning right above their head across the trees to see if there's anything that looks weird versus just, scanning along the ground like a goat or a cow or anything like that. He said, the place he hunted, he said, man, I got to where they would just stare, and then when they come in walking somewhere, they would automatically just start scanning about 10, I swear it's 10, 15 foot high.
And too, if you hunt the same stand, they know where it's at. Because I had that this morning. Deer walked in, a young little buck. I mean, he wasn't mature, wasn't as smart as the old ones. And as soon as he came in, he's looking right at me. I'm like, check my wind. It was good. Wind was blowing in my face. I know he didn't smell me. It's like, he knew. And we were talking about it on the last one, that people would get like dummies and sit them in their deer stand while they weren't there, like the whole off season.
So they just get used to it.
They get used to somebody being there. Or putting a pumpkin in a ground blind. Or a basketball, so it looks like a head.
I've had deer, and one thing they'll do, especially does, is they'll feed, and they'll look at you, and then they'll feed again real quick and look back up.
Yep.
And
try to get you to move.
Yeah. So they're
trying to break up your pattern.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we talked about. Like, if you look at old hunting magazines, like, going back to the 50s, people wore like a red flannel shirt.
Yeah.
Jeans, and something just to break up the pattern. And we've progressed that so far now that I guess what I'm asking is back then red flannel would break up your pattern. Mm-hmm. And now we have all these patterns that are so close to trees. I mean, they do a fantastic job now.
Yeah.
If anywhere you're hunting, you can find that camouflage clothing. And have they gotten to the point where their eyes are smarter than they were 50 or 60 years ago?
I've never thought about that.
They're getting smarter to how to break up patterns versus, because we know a flannel shirt just had vertical and horizontal stripes and one solid color and one contrasting color.
Which makes you think how far we will have to progress before it just eventually stops, adapting to.
I mean, you think now,
situation.
In Turkey, 15 years ago, it was a ghillie suit. I mean, you wore a ghillie suit because you look like a leafy tree sitting at the bottom of the tree. And, that's one of the things that's so amazing. And how far is that going to have to go now in order to continue to keep doing it?
Well, that's one thing I noticed. Because this was my first year really turkey hunting, and just with deer, I mean, they can see good, but a lot of it is sit still. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize too, like when you're holding your bow, you can be as still as you want, but you're still twitching, and they can pick that up. But turkeys, they will pick you out from 100 yards away.
You personally have the smartest turkeys in Surrey County, I think.
Yeah. There's no pressure on them, and so there's zero pressure on these turkeys here. And the thing about it is I think that they're so. But you would think, for me being outside and me being around, and the hens will come right up in my front yard a lot, and they don't they don't seem too spooked. They'll get on and get gone, especially when they got little pullets with them. But it's weird to say, but I have a cousin that's an avid turkey hunter, and he said if they didn't have eyes, you could just walk up behind them.
You can walk up and shoot them. They can't smell you. They can't hear you.
They can see you.
Yeah.
And we were standing on my back porch here, and we heard one calling from the hillside next to me, and he said, "Hey, he's already seen you." He's like, he knows we're here. He's like, he can see. He said he can see all the way through here, and I was like, this is unreal. And he's been all over the United States killing turkeys. And he's like, man, their eyeballs are just impeccable.
It's unreal.
And so when you talk about hunting, that's one of the things that, I guess that's one of the things for me and my time commitment now to hunting, the backside of it and squirrel and tree dog hunting hadn't changed about it. You know, if
Yeah,
you're coon hunting, you're not
wear whatever,
and if you're
not
squirrel
whatever,
hunting,
but yeah.
like if we were going to go steal squirrel hunting, like sit underneath an acorn tree and wait, now you got to be camouflaged up. And with a dog, you don't have to worry about that as much, and worry about your scent. When I was deer hunting, I would always worry about my tobacco spit because that is a human smell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're spitting underneath your stand, well, that is saliva coming from your mouth.
Yeah.
That's not a foreign scent to them. And my brother would always keep a small 20-ounce bottle on his inside of his shirt pocket, and he would always leave his jacket out a little bit where he could spit down in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the greatest invention I ever came up with that I never decided to make, and I probably could have made $1 million off.
You got lots of these.
I called it the silent spitter, and so what I came up with was a piece of surgical tubing that you took a pacifier for a baby and you cut the nipple out and you ran the tube up into the pacifier. So I'm sitting there with my mouth shut. You usually got a mouth covering on, and that tube goes down and it fit onto a 20-ounce Coke bottle. And so you screwed it down, so when you spit, it was like spitting in a straw. It went down the tube and into the bottle, so you didn't have to ever move your hands or anything or worry about leaving
spitter.
The
Next
silent
week.
spitter. I got a drawing of it still. I drew it up at my desk at school, and I was like, this is a great idea. We'll sell 100 of them at the Dixie Deer Classic.
Next week, you'll go to our link and you'll see tagged out silent spitter. We'll be selling them.
It was, and I really, because I never thought about, I did wintergreen.
Yeah.
Well, there's no wintergreen nothing in my woods or anywhere around here. And, they were like, well, you're also spitting right underneath your stand.
Yeah.
And
even without tobacco spit, just spitting.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I try to be conscious of is I try not to spit just in general.
Because we
you're
spend
leaving
all this
human
money
scent.
covering our sin up.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there thinking, my brother's like, man, you're spitting wintergreen right
Spit,
down
burp,
beside
fart,
you.
you don't even think about
They're
it.
going to smell it. And
Now, one thing, though, that we've talked about it a bunch, cigarette smoke. People will kill big deer while smoking cigarettes because that's a scent
crazy.
cover.
It's crazy.
And I wonder if it's especially like in this area when tobacco was so big and people were curing tobacco at this time of year, because September to October they were getting it out of the fields and putting it in the barns. I wondered, because when you smell that curing tobacco coming out of those barns, if you ever been in an old tobacco barn, they smell like somebody's lighting a cigarette. And I kind of wondered if that was because that was a natural smell around these bottoms and hollers that they could. They done, but it is the other people. Like people used to crack open an old cowboy
and
killer
they kill the
let it
biggest
rip.
buck.
I might have to start smoking so I can kill big deer.
Yeah, that's one of the funny things. You're right, and I mean I used to think about it. I don't know that my Uncle Raymond and I talk about. I don't know that he owned any camouflage in all his years of hunting.
I was going to ask you that. How much of a difference? I know we were talking about, if it'll come to a point where camouflage has to be so sophisticated that you about can't hunt without being spotted. But like, when it gets to a certain point, like say outside of this, because you've got First Light, you've got Sitka, a pair of bibs is $480 because you're paying for warmth and quietness, but you're paying for the pattern. Is it worth it? And it's like, how much of a difference does having Sitka versus Realtree Edge or Bottomlands?
I think it's always been a good argument because me and a friend of mine used to always say that the 30-30 Winchester or 30-30 Marlins probably killed more deer than any rifle combination because it used to be one of everybody's first rifles. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you'd go to Walmart and buy a 30-30 Winchester or a Marlin, just depending on what you like.
That's worth about $1,000.
Yeah, now that lever gun's worth a lot.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, that lever gun's not accurate because it's not a bolt. And there's probably some science behind that. There probably is some legit science. But when you start stacking deer bodies, it's
accurate enough to hit that big of a target to hit a deer.
You can't even buy ammo at Walmart without a background check now.
No,
it'll be 21.
Now we're at that point. But I mean, I think what's going to have to happen is we think about it now. I mean, you think about deer, they got blinds that look like hay bales.
Yeah,
and that's cool.
That is smart.
They got blinds that look like cows.
They got blinds that look like
cow
animals
blinds
and cow blinds and stuff like that. Yes, I mean they do. They got that, and you get back to thinking how much of this is the novelty to get the hunter to say, "Man, I really need that to kill something."
Because who are they advertising to? They're not advertising to deer.
No,
they're advertising. It's like cell cameras, or we were talking about that. How it's you look at a camera and you think, "Oh, they probably blend in with a tree. That looks cool." Yeah, it's gonna look cool to you because they're marketed into you.
Yeah,
they're not marketed to deer.
That's the thing it's like that in a lot of hunting, all kind of hunting and fishing.
Yeah,
I watched a guy not too long ago on the same argument. he was like 90% of the lures that you buy are not painted to look anything like what's naturally in the water. It's made to be visually appealing to you, so you go, "Ooh, man, I bet a fish would bite that because I like that."
Mm-hmm.
He said when there's really only about 5 color patterns that you're going to see in fresh water fishing. And I mean, it made a lot of sense. And he actually showed the baits in different colors of water, and he showed it about what it looked like versus what is in natural habitat. And he wasn't knocking anything.
Yeah.
He was just like, "Man, you got a tackle box full of lures, and you probably only use 4.
I've never seen a pink fish.
Yeah, I've never seen
pond.
a pink fish. I mean, but and it's one of those things that it is what it is. But I think hunting is going to go to a point where I think everybody makes a full circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it goes back to like in my profession, my day-to-day profession of coaching, everything makes a full circle. And so what is old becomes new again. And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to have to see some people going back to the old school ways of patterning.
Air raid offense.
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about and we see like somebody running the wishbone has been gone for 30 years, and if you brought it back now, there's not a lot of people that can still do it. But
there's still teams running West Coast stuff too. People say it's outdated, but teams don't practice how to cover it anymore because hardly nobody does it. So
when you think about hunting, you think about that. And so if a deer hadn't seen a flannel pattern, maybe it goes to where they're going to put a flannel pattern with a camo breakup.
Yeah.
So that the breakup lines look different than just wearing a full tree pattern.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. That, or they're either going to they're doing these LED basketball courts for college. They're going to get like an LED suit so you can not be bright, but I guess change your pattern or something. But or they'll have a pattern. If it's windy, you can push a button and the pattern on your shirt moves like the tree does, and the leaves burn. Yeah. So when you got to move, you push the movement button. Yeah. And now when you move your arm, it just looks like the leaves are rustling through the wind.
If Sick is $600 for a pair of bibs, I can't imagine what that's going to cost.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is the fact of people are trying to push new hunters too. And so a new hunter goes out and they're like, "Oh, well, I have to buy this $400 pair of bibs because that's what works." And they don't realize you can go to Walmart and buy a pair of jeans for $20 and it works.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there is some things to be said, that there is some quality.
No, there is,
and then there is some marketing that's heavily involved. Because one of the guys I know that's killed as many deer as I can care to remember, he bought Walmart Realtree jacket every year. And he had Walmart bibs. He had the Walmart Realtree bibs.
I wear Realtree Edge from Walmart.
And
straight from Walmart.
That's what he wore.
Yeah.
And I mean, his would be old and faded. They wasn't even bright no more. And it didn't matter, because I think the lost part of hunting for any type, I'm not going to squirrel hunt in the grove of pines. Even though they like pine cones, they like acorns a lot more, and they like things like that. I think the biggest thing that we've lost the art of hunting is, even deer hunting and any kind of other hunting, is knowing how the animals feed, react, what they want. Are they really patterns? Because, I watched a video not too long ago. A guy basically had tracked a deer, and it would come up at a certain time every day and eat. And we always thought they made a big circle like cattle do. They come back to redstone. He said it would get up and eat. It would go back and lay down. Then it would get up later that afternoon. It'd go eat, and then it would go back and lay down.
That just sounds like me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a human being. But for me, it's always like, where are they coming in at? Where are they leaving from? And I do think parts of the year, that's probably true when they're foraging.
When they're moving.
And they're moving.
They'll move miles during rut.
But a deer or any animal is going to stay near its food source and near a water source.
And they'll bed near it.
And they're going to bed near it. And thinking that they just get up and frolic around all day in the fields and just hunt, they're not, like you said, they're always curious about their surroundings.
So it
ain't like they just go walking around. They'll stand beside a road and get hit by a car all day long. But
it's not like they figured that one out.
On a new day, on an average day, they probably don't. And I think that the thing that we have lost in hunting for the most part is not necessarily how well we camouflage ourselves, it's how well we understand what we're hunting.
Yeah.
Because it's gotten to a point where I know a lot of gun hunters that have killed a lot of deer that they're just bow only. And some people that's been compound bow for a long time have went all the way back to like the recurve.
Yeah.
bow and trying to stalk deer.
I debate going bow only every year.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Well, the Native Americans had to stalk. They even had to stalk buffalo.
Yeah.
To get close enough to kill them with arrows, and so they knew by dressing like a buffalo. I mean, it sounds stupid.
No.
But I mean, and I'm not being funny about this, but what if we created a deer suit? And you laid down in that deer suit like you were bedding down in a laurel thicket.
I feel like it's a little dangerous.
It 100% would be dangerous. But if you were hunting on a piece of property that was only yours, I mean, you probably I would, because some of these people shoot anything that moves.
You'd either get shot or bred with.
The hunting public, we were talking about them earlier. They put a buck, like a cardboard cutout of a buck, on the front of their bow, and killed a giant with it.
Yeah.
That buck thought it was another buck, and
like
they were walking
turkeys.
up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a guy that put a full spread in the back of his hat one time and crawled across the ground. and he was the only person hunting. But the gobbler, he was crawling through tall grass.
Yeah.
He just thought it was a small jay coming up. He blasted a big old turkey.
Yeah.
And I mean, but now you're taking the point too. If there's somebody on the other side of the field and he don't see that red hill pop up, then he might blast you. But and I know that's something different. But when we talk about all these patterns, there's nothing wrong with them. But when is it going to have to revert back?
Yeah.
To give them something they haven't seen.
Yeah.
Or
That's
they
the
haven't
thing.
been
They
around.
pattern us.
Yeah.
Way more than we pattern them. You park your truck the same. I park right out here every time I hunt. I take the same route in. There might be a buck bedded 50 yards away, and he's watching me and I've talked about this a ton. You go every time you're not there, you get
Pictures.
godforsaken cell cameras. I use them. I hate them and I love them because they'll ruin a hunt, but you get good intel from them. So every time I'm not there, the buck's showing up, and when I'm hunting him, he's not there. What if he's bedding down watching me, and every time I park my truck,
That's
gonna
time
get up.
to move. Yeah.
And then every time I leave or don't show up that morning, I'm good to get up. He's not here.
So how much of being a good hunter is really being a good detective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And never repeating your same thing twice, or
Yeah.
trying to not be in the same pattern, because that's really, we're trying to pattern something that's inevitably trying to pattern us.
And they're a lot better at it.
And trying to figure it out, because they have a lot better senses than we do. And that's the thing that, even when we coon hunted, we had to rotate where we hunted, because if we turned our dogs loose a lot in one place back, let's say 3 nights in a row, those coons would pattern us. And we had cameras back then, but they weren't the kind like we have now. They just take pictures. So we started hanging cameras over a feeder.
Mm-hmm.
And we would find out that they'd eat 2 hours. They'd eat right at the dusk, where these coons were eating at about 8 o'clock. Well, that's about the time we was cutting our dogs loose, especially with young dogs, trying to get them to run a hot track off a feeder, trying to get them started, trying to get them going. We would have to change our hunting times. And because they would start patterning us. They like whether they saw our truck lights coming around the field apart, or they heard a tailgate drop, or they heard a dog whine, whatever it was, they were patterning us. And so now, we think about things. In squirrel hunting, people will say, well, on a real windy day, squirrels are not going to move. Or if it's real cold, like it's real cold, squirrels are not going to come out till the sun gets them moving and gets them stirring. There's some truth to that, but at the same time, I've killed squirrels with snow on the ground.
Yeah, me too.
And my other Stevens cur, this Simon is dead now. I took him in one of the worst windstorms we had just because it was a day I had off and I wanted to get him some woods time, and we treated 2 squirrels, shot them out.
Really?
And I mean, the top of the trees were swaying, and a lot of people, I won't go. And probably if I had more time, this ain't a perfect day. But when we talk about patterning those animals and getting to it, I think that's some of the things that deer. The guy I was telling you about that said they started looking up. He swore in Georgia, in his area, they were starting to go completely nocturnal.
Yeah.
Because there was less pressure on them at night.
Yep.
And they were starting to pattern people in that area so much in central Georgia that they were going to start to go nocturnal. Mm-hmm. And if you notice bucks, middle of the season, when they've had a little bit of pressure put on them or the rut's done,
October,
you'll get them at night, standing on your feeder in the middle of the night when you hadn't got them summertime, early summer, when you hadn't got them. And there's probably some people that know a lot more about deer hunting than I do, but I do think there is some things like, man, I can leisurely get out here and walk. And I think that's why, I know the seasons are the reasons they are, but I almost think the animals almost know, they don't know the seasons, but
I swear they
do. I think they kind of know the time of year where I can be a little careless about where I'm gonna be because
how many turkeys did we see down here during deer season versus turkey season?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They know. They know. And once they breed, they're going to get scared.
Yeah. Yep. And I guarantee you, a deer has never thought in 100-degree heat that it's going to get shot because they, just middle of summer, they don't.
Well, that's the thing. You talk about the windy day thing. A lot of people won't hunt deer on a windy day. If a deer recognizes that, all the stands are empty, check it. Because they do. They'll walk by and they'll check stands, whether it be at night or, early morning, late afternoon. But it's windy. They notice on windy days, they don't feel pressure. So they'll move,
Instead
of hot days.
Instead of the hunter saying, "Okay, the wind's coming from north to south. My stand is in the north, and I need to hunt the opposite direction of the wind today, so that they don't smell me before they ever get to me." And a lot of times we don't because we're so fixated.
I'm bad for that
on stands, and it is hard to move one, and it's aggravating, and everything else. And I kind of wonder. I'd like to see a study on how much ground blind hunting is being done now, like mobile ground blinds, versus stand hunting.
Mobile ground blinds, probably hardly any, but fixed ground blinds in the same spot's been there for 5 years.
Yeah,
a good amount.
So I kind of wonder if somebody really got like those old pop-up ground blinds, and you got in there and you get hunkered down, and you really played the hand against Mother Nature.
Yeah,
could you do it? A lot of people tell you
might have to try that.
It's all the time when you get a dreary day, the turkeys be out in the middle of the field 100%.
Yep.
It's 100%. And that's kind of the thing that, you see. But I think that it's going to have to turn its course with humans hunting animals. Like there's going to have to be some retroactive things that are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because,
I definitely think it'll devolve within the next 20 so years.
Evolve or devolve?
Devolve.
Because, how many more patterns can they really come up with?
No.
And, I remember when the first mossy oak and real tree stuff come out, and now it's like they got the 3D, they got the, it looks, in depth as it is.
I've got a pair of Sitka gloves. I've got a shirt too.
Aaron has Sitka.
I have Sitka. Nah. Didn't pay full price, but I put the glove against a tree. I swear it's like my hand disappeared.
Yeah,
it's like so. But at the same time, I was hunting with a buddy, and he had on Walmart like I've got on now Realtor Edge, and for whatever I'd taken a picture for whatever he was in it, and I about couldn't see him. So it's like if your pattern's broken up, to deer, they don't see colors like us. Does it matter that much?
If you go back to the military and like the Vietnam War era. And those snipers didn't have stuff that looked exactly like their surroundings.
It was just green.
It was just green. They knew how to bush it up and make it look like their surrounding. And then all of a sudden, they're in close tactical quarters having to do some tough things. And I think that's just where it's kind of like anything else. You feel like when you buy an exercise bike, in 2 weeks you're going to be in shape.
Yeah.
Versus when you buy some of this stuff when you're starting to hunt, especially, I'm automatically going to kill deer because I got this brand on or I got this. And that's not always the case.
No.
I think if I got back into it, my eyesight's not near what it would be. I would like to revert back to, we're talking about people stacking deer up 60, 70 years ago with iron sights.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have the best optics. You can get an optic to tell you anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
optics,
which leads me to my next invention that I never came up with.
Told you, full of these.
I decided, with GPS being as big as it was. We got GPS on our phone. We got GPS. It tells you anything.
Mm-hmm.
I had bought these, the little dog tracking GPSs they'll put in their hips.
I think you told me this.
We were trying to put them in the nock of an arrow, so that when you shot a deer with your arrow, you had an app on your phone that would track the arrow so if you lost the arrow and it went through.
Yeah.
Or if it got thrown out somewhere when a deer took off on down there, you could at least get to your arrow and that might take you on a blood trail.
Yeah.
And I just never developed the app for it. I put the thing in there and glued it up because
you had Chuck Hyatt draw you out of.
Yeah, me and Chuck drew it up and we glued it up in there and we were like, we got to get this thing balanced just right because it didn't weigh nothing.
Yeah.
It weighed like a grain of rice. I was like, this would be a great idea.
Yeah, I would buy that.
That would be a great because
we lose arrows left and right.
Not only losing the arrows, but if you
get
shoot
stuck
a
in a deer
and they take off, then you want to do right by the animal as much as you possibly can as a hunter. You want to do right by by what you harvest. And that was always one thing I always thought of, was like, man, that's one of the biggest obstacles to overcome. And then, here's a way that, well, we all got phones in the woods, or, a Garmin GPS or something. Well, we just, and you would kind of know where everything was, but, we drew it up and kind of put it together, but we never really developed the app or tested it out. So
everything is just so technological.
It is.
I mean, have you seen the Garmin Zero bow sight? That is ridiculous.
Tells you, like, you don't even have to sight it.
You don't even need a rangefinder. You just press a button and it puts a dot on where you need to shoot.
Yeah,
that's not hunting. That's cheating.
And I'll say the big thing about that is, too, if you shoot a gun or a bow, everybody shoots a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And every gun, you can pick up. We could go buy two 270s, Mossberg 270s right now. Buy them off shelf at Walmart. We could set them in a gun vise and get them zeroed in and pull trigger. And one of them might be a hair to the left, the other one might be dead on. And so you got to learn to shoot that gun and set up your optics to overcome that. And I think, like what you're talking about with that new stuff, you're also taking away of practicing shooting.
Yeah.
And even though, I got it dead on. Yeah, 100% you got it dead on. But what are the conditions?
Mm-hmm.
Are the conditions of, is it windy? Am I having to shoot at a funny angle because there's a limb in front of me? What am I doing? Yeah, if I put this on 0, it's dead on. But what are the variables? And I think it's great technology, 100%.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, you're also not wasting arrows and wasting time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we're losing some of the fun and the mastery of hunting and the art of hunting by leaning. It's great stuff. We've got a lot of things in the profession I do that have sped up things and helped things. But what I find that it has actually done is we fixed this issue, and so now it gives me more time for somebody to invent something else that's going to take up that time that I've just created. And so how much of the I see this thing on TikTok a lot that says, I go to the woods with a lot, I always come out with a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I loved about when I especially when I got up here, where I lived, my girls, I could drop them off in the house. My wife was still at work. I come on, put my camouflage on, walk 50 yards out my back door and be in a deer stand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was, one, it was convenient for me. And I knew that they were in hollering distance if something was wrong. But I could also sit out there and just decompress from everything.
Therapy.
And that's why when I go fishing, I don't really take my phone except for Mercy. I leave it in a glove compartment in my boat, or I leave it in my tackle bag if I'm in my small John boat, because I really just want to experience, like up here at Cana Lake about 6 years ago, I watched the doe early in the morning swim across that lake. And I did get my phone out and take a picture of that, because I was like, man, you'll never see that again. But his neck was just, and it was swimming across the lake to the other side.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, it's great. I got that memory. But if I'd have probably been sitting looking at my phone or something else, I would have never seen that happen.
How many things have all three of us probably seen in the woods that you just don't get to see every day? Like, seeing. There's plenty of things.
The first fox I've ever seen was back here.
Yeah, a red fox back there.
I tried to kill it, I missed, but
first bear I seen was right out the door. So
big one on the trail camera last year.
He had a huge one on the trail camera, and I walked out my back door in June one day, and there was one sitting in the bed of my truck eating Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce.
I don't blame him.
That was one of the things that I love. But you're right, and you see things like the first wild hog I ever walked up on. We had dogs baying them. And that was, what do you do in that situation with a .22 rifle and it's a 300-pound hog? That's not going to do any damage.
Nope.
Yeah.
So, we were all looking for trees in the swamps of Georgia. But, you do, and you see things.
Yeah.
Like my first shooting star was hunting coon hunting one
Really?
night. And we had our lights off, and I seen one. And that was,
just seeing the sun come up in the morning.
And my wife always talked about it. Seeing the day come to life.
Yes.
Like the birds start chirping at a certain time. Things start and it's like in a rank and file of order. And being able to see that, and we went and camped at Cape Lookout to do some fishing. You camp right on the beach. You have to ferry over there. There's 2 bathrooms. There's a ranger station, and there's a freshwater place, and that's all. And you just camp on the beach. And we did that, and she saw that. We went to bed at 8 o'clock. When it got dark, there was nothing really else to do. We didn't take a TV or we kind of roughed it. And then you'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then the day comes, and the birds are flying and feeding in the morning down the ocean, and you see that. And I think I think that's one of the things we miss about hunting, because you get so entranced in the kill or the hunt or the pressure of, man, you know, I'm spending this time doing this, that we forget about, man, I'm really doing this to enjoy it.
God's creation.
And get out there and see some things that I'm never going to see if I don't get out.
And even the stories, like, I mean, funny stories. Like, me and Aaron, we had our climbers out here last year, just like, you know, 10 feet apart maybe. And we saw this big black blob walking.
I thought it was a bear.
I thought it was a bear. Next thing you know, it disperses into 6 raccoons. I looked at him and he was snickering and I was laughing. It was
for whatever reason, it was just funny.
I mean, it is funny because if you've never observed a raccoon in the wild, they're one of the funniest animals to watch, because they're super smart, but they're just weird about how they do things. It's like you hear a squirrel on the leaves, it sounds like an elephant, and you'll think
squirrel.
Yeah, you'll think there's a deer coming, and you look around, there's this little bitty squirrel scurrying. You're like, man, I thought that was gonna be a big deer, and it's just a little bitty squirrel.
The one of the first ever morning hunts I went on, I just got into hunting, and I heard footsteps, but it wasn't a deer. I'd never heard these type of footsteps before. It's just like, like human almost. You know, deer's, but this was just. I'm like, that's not a deer, and it's still dark, so it's not a squirrel. It's not a coyote, because those are, you know, they trot. And the thing is getting closer and closer. I said, there's a person walking up on me. I saw my flashlight. It's a raccoon.
Yeah.
I'd never heard it before. The first time a doe blew at me in the woods.
Oh, that's scary.
Oh, I about ran out. I mean, it's because I'd never heard it before.
And
I
you
didn't
know,
know
a lot
what
of
a
times
blow
you don't
sounded
see
like.
them. Yeah, you don't see them. They see you.
They
and
see
they make
you
a
like
noise.
tonight.
Yeah.
The scariest I ever had, we were walking in Georgia, right along the edge. We were on a wildlife management area, coon hunting, and I was walking right along the edge of the woods, fixing to go down into the dogs, and I was in some short pines. Well, turkeys evidently love to roost in short pines. And I walked underneath that pine tree, and it sounded like the whole top of it was coming out, breaking limbs and everything else. And I had knocked a turkey off its roost at night, and he was gone.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was like, man, I mean, I like hit the deck and thought the tree was falling on me. But I can remember one of my buddies, Todd Wiggins, that he's a pastor now in Georgia. We grew up together. We were coon hunting one night deep in a swamp. I mean, deep in a swamp. We must have been a mile or two back in the swamp, one way in, one way out.
Like public ground?
No, it was one of my friends' farms, and they own several hundred acres, and one end of it was nothing but the Etchiconee Swamp, and big hogs, big coons, and it was nothing for us to trap a 20, 25-pound coon out of there. Like, it was just big, and we were coon hunting that night, and we had gotten back, and the dogs had to hunt hard in there because there was a lot of water. You would have to wear waders a lot of times just to be able to get back through there a lot. And we were waiting on the dogs to track something, and we kind of just sat down. And he heard a hoot owl way off in the distance. And Todd is a big turkey hunter, and he collects turkey calls. He's got most people have like a curio cabinet full of dolls or collectibles. He's got a curio cabinet full of turkey calls. And he said, "Watch this, guys." And so he pulled out a turkey call, and he went to calling. Next thing you know, that owl's calling back, and he's closer. And he walked that owl to the point where he hit that turkey call, and next thing you know, there's 2 big old hoot owls sitting over our head in that big tree. And I turned my coon light on and looked up, and it's the most unnerving thing in the world is to see a big owl looking right down at you. And he said, you know, the owl's got to be the loudest bird of the night. And he said, turkey wants to be the loudest bird of the day. And you know, how many people have used owl calls to locate turkeys?
You use it about every time.
I do every time turkey hunt.
And first thing when we pull up, he gives an owl call.
And I would have never thought about that at night, using a turkey call to make an owl come.
Yeah.
And I mean, but he sat there and he'd call, and he did about 5 or 6 times, and every time that owl would hoot louder and get closer.
Opposite way.
Hoot loud, because he wanted to see why in the world is this turkey at night trying to outcall me at night. And it was one of the, we looked up, there's 2 of them, and they was twirling their heads around. They was looking down, and you could see them big talons looking down. I'm like, man, he's about to come down and figure out what
big
we
yellow
are.
eyes.
Yeah, and big eyes. And he's like, he's about to come down and get a hunk of one of us, and this is going to be a tough situation. You know, and again, stuck with a .22 rifle.
Yeah.
And I think shooting the owls like against the law, but we was in the back of the swamp. You got to do what you got to do sometimes. Yeah. But, you know, that's one of the things that I think is, I think that's, you know, fun about hunting is, like you said, you get to see so many things that you're not necessarily see so many experiences. And, you know, it's some time away from the daily life of just the hustle and bustle and all the stress we have to deal with. You can kind of get away for a minute and and kind of slip back in time a little bit and see what how life was when it was you and you were dependent on yourself, and not a lot of other things.
And that aspect is almost lost because I'm as guilty of it as anybody. Cell cameras.
Mm-hmm.
They're great. I wouldn't go without them, but part of me misses going in and checking the SD card and pulling up 1,000 pictures on the computer and being so excited to see. It's just like in 5 minutes my phone might buzz. Oh, there's a buck down there right now.
Yep. So it makes it easier to pattern things.
It does, but at the same time, you lose that aspect of not knowing what's there.
And the seat time of, man, I really earned this thing.
Yeah.
Not that you're not, but I mean, there are some people that'll hunt a deer all winter.
Yeah.
And finally get a shot on it, and that's kind of one
and figure out without cameras, figure out where it's at, figure out game trails, and that's amazing to me.
Both Aaron's last year were just
flukes.
Yeah.
Well, you remember that one I killed right down here?
Yep.
See, there's another thing. Talking about cell cameras. That deer showed up with that big deer that I'd called Bronco down here. See, like, he ain't showed up this year. I don't know if he's alive. Had I not had cell cameras, I'd be hunting that deer. Could be good or bad because he might be alive and I'm sitting here thinking he's dead. But that deer, he showed up with him in September last year. Never saw him again. In person, on camera. I just quit hunting him. Figured he's dead. I hunt the other buck. Well, I put up here in the rain.
Yeah, it was.
In pouring rain. 3 o'clock. And he's sitting right out here in your field. There was that dead doe on the side of your driveway that got hit by a car. I stopped to check it out and I heard it sound like a pig snoring. Just brrr, which is something you'd never experience if you weren't. But brrr, and I was like, is there a pig out here? I looked and he was running those in your field. Grabbed a rifle, set up on my truck and popped it right there and he had to get in my stand. It's like, but I thought that deer was dead because of cell cameras, because he hadn't been on camera, and they lie. They lie big time. And I will not hunt a place because I'm not getting pictures, and hunt a place and the big buck walks up. Because if it's behind the camera, it's not taking a picture of it.
No.
I think one of the biggest things for me enjoying the woods is, how man was created from the earth, and I think just taking a little part of it with you throughout your day is, it gets you closer to God and all that, and that's why I enjoy it.
I've always said I felt closer to God in deer stand than church view.
Yeah, and it is. You get back out there in nature and you start seeing the wonders and you start seeing the way that nature works together in harmony, and then you figure out, man, there's something a lot bigger than what people think that's got a control over this.
There's a designer,
and there's a designer, and there's a reason why all this happens the way it's going to be, and that's one of the things, like I always said, like when I went out with my dogs, it's time you can get away, you can clear your mind. It's a time where you can really refocus yourself and what's really going on versus what's in your head about how tough something is that you're going through or going around. And that is one of the things that, for me in the springtime, it's fishing, standing in the middle of a river and wade fishing and not caring. It's gotten to the point where even with my dog squirrel hunting, if we don't bring anything home or if I go fishing and I don't get a bite,
still happy.
It was better than sitting here on the couch stressing about something.
Yeah.
Or talking about something that's crazy going on.
I lose more when I fish.
Yeah. I mean.
Tell them about that story.
I lost my eyesight this spring because of it. In my right eye.
Really?
Yep.
Did you catch a hook to it?
Yeah, split shot weight. Trout fishing. Came back Mach 1. Right.
Wow.
They've probably heard this way too many times.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell everybody new, I guess. They're just going to have to deal with it. But split shot, it got stuck between my eyeball and my skull. And I went to the doctor. My eye was bleeding all the way inside. Aaron, first thing he told me was you catch more in the water.
So you're going to catch something in them trees.
Jeez.
LASIK and everything.
The funny thing is, we was fishing with worms where he's down in trout waters. And he had a worm on his line. And where the split shot had got caught, like you said, between his orbital socket and his eyeball right there, his worm was dangling right here. Oh. And he felt right there.
I thought it was my eyeball.
Said, my eyeball fell out.
I was freaking out. I was screaming bloody murder. I feel like the people in the crack house next to us was wondering what was going on.
They were out there looking. When they were out there looking.
What in the world's going on out there in the middle of that we do stuff like that all the time. And I think there was a buddy of mine. He wanted to get into deer hunting. This has been over a decade ago, and I have one of those the very first night muzzle loaders, the ones he built by hand.
Huh.
And I have one of the first ones, and he was wanting to get into deer hunting. And I was like, well, you can come sit in this stand up here. And he didn't have a rifle at the time. I said, you can use my muzzle loader. I said, you're not going to shoot more than 50, 60 yards inside where you're going to be. I said, I'll go down and hunt the front. So I took a 30-30 with me to the front. And I started walking down to my front stand, and I heard, Pew! And I was like, man, that sounded like a cap went off, but the powder didn't. And I had just loaded it for him that morning. You know, it was one you had to, man, you about had to butter the barrel to get them savage slugs go down in. It was that tight. And I was like, man. So I went up there and I said, hey, here's my 30-30. Hand me down that rifle, and I'll go load, put another cap in it. Because it had these red discs that you had to put in it. And so I got it down. And when I got it down, I was walking back to the house. I was like, did I unload that thing last year? I was like, man, I can't remember if I unloaded it last year or not. And so when I got back to the garage, I got my plug opener in the back because you had to push everything out the back. I opened that thing up. There was 4 50-grain.
Oh my God!
And 2 slugs.
Oh wow!
If that cap would have went off, he'd have Elmer Fudded himself
Yeah.
right there in the tree. And I hadn't shot that thing since I unloaded it because I was like, man, I can't. Because used to at the end of muzzleloader season, I'd just take it
That's an elephant gun.
Oh yeah, he had 200 grains and 250.
Because I usually use 150 in mine.
Yeah, he had 200 grains and then he had 250 caliber. It would have split the barrel. Because that old night, you could only, I don't even know if you could use 100. I can't remember. It was 2. You could use 100 grains of powder. Mm-hmm. And I had 200 and 2 slugs. And I told him when he got down, I was like, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I said, I forgot to unload this thing last year. And I had you set up for me.
So you loaded up one after another.
Yeah, see, I had 2 powders and a slug in there from the year before, which is not
and you just
good.
put 2 more powders.
And I was like, yeah, and I put 2 more powders in him, and I had him set up for the next morning. And then something about it when he handed it to me,
muzzleloader shotgun.
It dawned on me. He was like, I was like, did I unload that last year or not? And I was like, I better check. When I got here in the garage, I was like, and what it was, there was a doe walked in on him. He said, man, I had it dead to rights because I had a little single power scope on it. And because that's all you really needed for it. I put a single power scope on it. And he said, I pulled the trigger and he heard that little cap go off. The powder didn't go off, the cap did. And he said, looked up at me and it took off running. And I was like, well, thank God it didn't go off because I might have been scraping you out of that tree because that barrel was not rated for that. And I mean, you think about it, and I know that's probably a terrible story. Always be safe.
Yes.
And always know. But I mean, you know, you think about stuff and you think about the stuff and the experiences that you have and you know, I saw my first river otter fishing on the new river. You know, I thought it was a bear coming down out of the woods, and I look and it was just a stupid otter coming down off the bank through a heavy wooded area with a lot of leaves on the ground. He slid in right underneath the boat and you watched him go by, and I was like, in Georgia I don't ever remember seeing them. If you ever see your first alligator up close, that's unnerving. Yeah. I mean,
I've never done that before. Yeah.
That's you have a lot of appreciation for why in Georgia I never waded a river fishing because we actually have, you know, there's been plenty of alligators. You know, we go coon hunting, you shine your light across the water, and it look like Christmas lights from our eyes just sitting there. And you know, you had to be a little more. We had a lot more snakes down there, and you had to be a lot more, you know, vigilant about walking through the swamps and stuff like that. It was just one of those things. We could go for 40 miles through a WMA, never see a paved road, and there'd be water everywhere because it's the swamps backing up.
So I guess Georgia's like diet Florida.
Yeah, it is. Water. It's a cross between swamp people in Louisiana and like Florida because you know we had everything to kill you. Except for like a cobra. Yeah. And, you know.
That's good.
I mean, and, you know, for a long time in Georgia, they wouldn't let them hunt. It wasn't up until maybe the last 15, maybe 20 years ago, they started lottery hunting gators because they wouldn't let you hunt them. And they started overpopulating.
North Carolina does this.
They're lottery now?
Yeah, because they started overpopulating. And
I know in Florida, you get money if you kill a gator, don't you?
And so now.
There's a python. That's
python.
Yeah, python's
$70 a foot.
Nutria.
And the nutria, because they're taking over. But I actually had a former football player that I coached in Georgia. He just got back from Florida back in the summer, They went. He went with one of them guys that's on TV that goes python hunting, and they also shoot them. Is it iguanas?
Mm-hmm.
That sit in the trees. That's taking over South Florida.
Yeah.
He went down there on a boat, and they boat hunted the islands for python, and then they shoot them iguanas with something that's like a high powered like single shot.
Air rifle.
And they were knocking them out of trees.
So then you can do it in urban areas and not have to worry about getting the law called on you and all that.
I mean, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, for
sure. Alligator hunting. The crazy thing about that is people, they started realizing, there's some 7 foot 300 pounders in Georgia, and they'll do some damage to your dog. They love dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, they love a barking dog. That's like bacon for them. And so, a lot of people just finally started saying we're finding them in our irrigation ponds on our farms and everything else, and it's time to kind of try to slowly do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think what amazes me is like even up here in North Carolina, the abundance of deer.
And we don't get any more tags.
And
I will preach it. We get 4 doe tags. I'm not trying to slander or the WRC or whatever because they do a lot.
Yeah.
But it's like there's deer laying on the side of the road everywhere, and you think at some point, and there's less hunters, less youth hunters. A lot of the old guys that grew up hunting, they're getting too old to hunt, and so there's not as many hunters, and you don't have as many tags, and so I tag out on does every year, but if I had 10 doe tags, I'd fill them.
Yeah.
I'd find somebody to give the meat to, or we'd make jerky out of it, or
find somebody to use it.
Because probably eat all of it too.
Yeah. Unless you think, a lot of people can't hunt except for the weekends. And, you've coached football all week, Friday night. If you want to go hunt Saturday, you're not going to spend your whole day on a doe. Right. Unless you just really want. So you can't blame the people.
The seat time is the difference.
Yes, you cannot blame people for not wanting to shoot does. But, somebody like me who has more time to hunt, or a lot of younger people, and it's fun too. I enjoy it. You get your confidence up. I'll shoot as many does as they'll let me. 4 each year, and it don't look like it's going up.
No, and it may be because some things. I know they managed well with the blue tongue that they had.
Yeah.
I guess almost a decade ago they had that rash to come through and everything else, and the management. I think that's something that I've noticed that there seems to be a heavier abundance, and I think maybe in Georgia, and I could be way wrong. What we had is the deer are so small in Florida, like they're small,
they are.
that you would have a lot of people that were in a 3-hour drive. They would lease property up into Georgia so they'd have a place to come hunt and shoot at deer and stuff like that. And so I think that maybe but there's still some big deer killed down there, don't get me wrong. But I think with the management of it, it's like people talk about even the small things that we kill. We talk about squirrel and coon hunting to start out with. There's not a lot of people doing that. So they're getting overabundant.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
Yeah, that's why we added a spring squirrel season.
Yeah. Oh, we did?
Yeah.
I did not know.
It runs, I think it's March through April.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be good for you.
That'd be good for me. Because they used to shut off right there at small game season, like in late January, early February.
February 28th is the last day of squirrel season, and then back, and it might be April and May. I think it's April and May. It boots back up. So March takes a break, and then
that'll be good then, because February is so. And I try to give the people their time in the woods, because I don't want to be squirrel hunting the same time somebody's in the stand.
Yeah, because
that's not working for what's best for the hunting community at all. But that's February, when deer season would go out. It was tough in Georgia. Our small game went out. It went out February around Valentine's Day every year, and deer season there, I think
it runs through January.
It runs to the end of January,
yeah.
And so a lot of places would want us to hunt the coons to help kill out the turkeys, because they love turkey eggs, and they also they want to not steal all their corn, that they're putting in their feed and they're trying to feed. And so what we would get to hunt them 2 weeks, and not that I never saw a DNR stop us. I got asked for my license one time, and we were on a wildlife management area, and that was the first time I'd ever been asked, and I'd been on one of them 100 times. It ain't like they're really coming out looking for coon hunters at 12 o'clock in the night, see how many coons they killed. I mean, they just don't really care.
Yeah.
But, or really, probably to the point, squirrels, unless somebody just wants to be tic-tacky. But in Georgia, squirrels and stuff had gotten to the point where, man, if you had a truck or car parked in your yard and you didn't move it once a week, they chewed. They ate the wiring to my dad's fuel pump out on his truck. They chewed the plastic up underneath the hood. I mean, you couldn't keep a grill. I mean, they chewed the plastic. I mean, they'd chew up anything that was plastic or anything they could just chew on. And we had pecan orchards for miles.
I guess that's a good thing about having cats.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I got 2 cats. And
or your dog.
And y'all see, the funny thing is y'all see all these coons, and I never see them.
I get coons down here every night. My
trash cans right here, and even in the summertime when nobody's putting out anything, I never have them get my trash cans down here. I never have, but my goal in life is to. There's this guy on YouTube. He's an older gentleman, and his wife picked up a roadside coon that had been hit, and they nursed it back to health. Mm-hmm. And her dying wish was, if she died, that he would continue feeding the coons. So when they nursed this thing back to health, they turned it loose out his back door. They thought they'd never see the coon again. A few nights later, he brings back about 5 or 10 buddies. And they're sitting at their back door waiting to be fed. He feeds 5 pounds of hot dogs a night. And
that's crazy.
And if he's not feeding them, if you look him up, I think it's called the Raccoon Man or something. He lives up in like Nova Scotia, Canada, somewhere up in there. Mm-hmm. They will basically stand at the door and almost knock on it with his paw. And he'll go sit on his back porch, and they'll come up around him like he's going to tell them a bedtime story. And he's passing out hot dogs and cheap cookies, and they're sitting there eating. And I'm like, this is genius. This guy has created a YouTube channel, and all he does is sit around with cheap hot dogs and raccoons. And got them all named.
Probably his job.
And I mean, they come in droves.
Yeah.
And if he opens the door long enough, he's even got a dog, and the dog don't even bark at him no more because they're like friends. So if he opens up the door, the coons will come in and wait on him to bring their stuff out. I mean, and if they don't get fed enough, it's like they're going to gang up on the army and knock the door down. They'll just stand there. And I thought it was the neatest thing. But when we talk about like, can animals get used to people?
Oh, absolutely.
People, absolutely. But the funny part about it is I was thinking about, man, maybe I could be like the squirrel whisperer or something and have me some squirrels come up.
Just start feeding them, and then you can kill all of them.
Somebody's done that with deer. They're on TikTok.
Yeah.
And every morning they wake up, there's like 20 deer.
Yeah, like big bucks. Giant bucks.
She walks out and hands them corn. And
I know y'all have seen the TikToks with the black bears in Gatlinburg.
Yeah, the closing the door.
My dad used to work up at Primland, and he would see bears every day. And there would be bears trying to open doors, trying to open car doors. You have to keep a car locked or else they get in. He told me one day he's running outside to get in his car and cuts corner, standing there at his driver's door is a bear. And I wouldn't know what to do. But I guess after being around people that much, then
they're not having enough to eat because the cities and things are spreading out. I mean, you used to not see black bear here,
and they're overpopulating.
And now they're making a big comeback. Yeah. You're seeing more and more, and that's the thing that that's the biggest issue. Going back to animals, I'll tell you one more thing that scared me to death. If you've never been hunting at night and heard a bobcat cry.
Ooh. Oh, I've heard it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's like
a red fox scream.
Yeah, it's like hearing a woman scream. He'll set the hair up on the back of your neck, and that's we've seen a little bit. You heard a little bit more of them in Georgia because of the swampy areas and stuff. And I'm sure they're along the river banks here. You just don't hear as much about them or hear anything. But
we have a season for them. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people like trapping. And one of the things we talk about here is coyotes.
Coyotes will make hair on the neck stand.
Yeah, and
I hear them all the time over
plentiful.
here.
They're plentiful around me. Nobody really. There's a few varmint guys left, but there's not too many people that just want to go out and say, "Hey, I want to go, eradicate some coyotes."
Hopefully, we'll do that some this year.
I mean, that's really cool to get into, but that's another thing that with a little bit of equipment.
Yeah, it's an expensive hobby.
It's an expensive hobby.
Hunting it drains my bank account.
But at the end of the day, it's better than having some kind of.
Playing Fortnite
or something that you're not engaged in.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're not engaged like we talk about with nature and with people and with communities of people that want to pass things down. I mean, we all know, like when I was in high school, Mortal Kombat was a big thing. Now it's Fortnite. It's still the same game. They've just they've just relabeled it.
They're killing each other.
Yeah, and so I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we missed the fact of, like I said, my wife didn't grow up around hunting or anything like that, and she'll wade the rivers with me now and fish, and just because she's realized that
me and you didn't really grow up around it. We didn't.
you find a hobby and you latch onto it.
Yeah. I just randomly decided one day I had a rifle. I was like, I'm gonna go deer hunting.
Yeah.
Me too.
And then ever since I'm together. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. You find a camaraderie in it. You find a brotherhood in it.
Yeah.
And you can also find some peace in it.
Absolutely.
Lots of it.
That's one of the big things there.
Even like for me, when I don't get a kill, just hearing a deer, like hearing it, like there's no better feeling to me. Even, button buck, small doe, big doe, little buck, big buck, it don't matter. Just hearing the like, what's it going to be? And it gets me going. I love it.
I don't like to hear every noise a deer makes except for the blow.
I
like to hear them. I like to hear them. Yeah.
I snuck up, so we was hunting here last year.
He's a jerk to me when we hunt.
When I had that ladder stand hanging down there, and I've got the climber over here. And it was December, and this place had kind of slowed down. I'd killed that one here already. And I was like, I'm going to go mess with him. I was like, I'm going to take the long way around in case I see a deer. I ended up seeing some down there and put my crosshairs on one. I was like, if I kill this thing, I'm going to have to clean it. I was like, I want to save my doe tag till end of the year in case. And so I walk up, and he's 25 foot up in the tree. I'm like, I'm messing with him. So I put my phone out and start videoing, and just he texted me, he said, dude, there's a deer blowing at me, but I can't find it. I'm like, really? I'm like, maybe he ain't high enough in the tree. I don't know. And I look at him, he's like, sitting still as he could be. He's like, dude, I can't find it.
And then he racks a shell or a bullet with, what was it, your 308?
It's 308.
308, and just bang!
Walk right out of the tree next to him and
what the heck
shoot.
is going on? I'm in war right now.
The deer shooting back.
Yeah, they have
be
game
bad.
intelligence.
I was going to ask you, when you do quit coaching, which I don't believe you're going to die on the football field. You've been saying you're going to quit for like 5 years now, but now, do you think you'll get back into more, even squirrel hunting or deer hunting or whatever?
Yeah,
we're going to get kicked off this place.
No, I am going to get back into more squirrel hunting
because the football is right in fall, and even with me coaching little league, I can't hunt evenings.
No,
hardly ever get to hunt evenings.
It's tough to hunt evenings, and it's tough. And yes, I do, because as y'all talked about it, one of the things that I do miss is to have that time to just sit down and just enjoy the nature part of it, the enjoyment of that. You miss that part because you get so caught up in really pushing yourself to your own goals that we don't do a lot of. I don't like to call it self-help. We don't do a lot of self-reflection and just sit down and say, man, what am I thankful for? What am I blessed with? What am I doing? Did I, and just get out and take that breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing about me is like, I think that's going to be a big part of my life. I know it will be because it's something that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. But I think the difference in me being 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, it was about creating a dog that's going to win the Grand American Hunt or the Winter Classic, or I'm gonna have my picture in a magazine or something like that. Versus now, it's, man, what can I go out and enjoy today?
Yeah.
What kind of story could I write? One of the things I wish I'd have never stopped doing. An old man that I coon hunted with told me to do this, and you can do it with your phone now, but we had to do it with a piece of paper and a pencil. He said every time you go hunting, write down the moon phase. This was coon hunting. He said write down the moon phase, the temperature, the time you cut loose, and everything about the hunt that could have an impact. And he said keep that journal. And he said at the end of the season, he said maybe in the spring when you're just sitting around, he said open that journal back up and go back and read through it. And he said find the patterns and the connections. He said if you killed one, right, killed deer, seen three, what. He said, start looking at the weather patterns and the connections. And he said, you'll learn a whole lot about what you're doing. And I did that. And probably if I dug through one of these old Tupperware containers, I might could find one. And I think that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
that would be cool,
if I ever got to the point where I couldn't hunt no more, I could sit down and read. He said date it, year it, everything, And I could sit down and read those.
Kind of relive it.
Yeah, it'd almost be like me reading my own book in the woods.
That's almost why we're doing this. I know it's completely different, but YouTube, it's like, whether it does anything or not, in 10 years, we're like, this video come up of us. You know, you remember that, huh?
Go watch your stuff on
real
clown music.
And I think that's one of the beauties of like YouTube and things like that with GoPro cameras. You can almost do a video log, a vlog now.
Yeah.
That helps that because that's one of the cool things that you might be turning on this video 20 years from now like, man, they got this camo now that does this. And
when you move, when the wind blows it.
I remember when Back to the Future come out, we thought we was all going to be like on like hoverboards and flying cars in 2025, and here we sit.
Now we just eat Tide Pods.
Yeah, now we have high gas
about the vape in the woods versus a cigarette. Dude's going to have to get used to the vape juice.
They're going to like the berry blast more than tobacco.
High gas prices and fake cigarettes. We're smoking radiators. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. Totally different turn of events from what we thought it would be. But,
we're supposed to get better.
Yeah, and now it's antifreeze and everything else.
There must be some squirrels out there.
Yeah, that's my wife's lap dog from somewhere. But
I can tell when the dogs when every time I pull up, when Simon especially is, he kept me company one night. I was sitting in the hang on. He ran back and forth.
And that's one of the cool things.
That didn't bother me at all.
And what the funny thing was is like when you would call and say I'm coming hunting, I'd put him up.
Yeah.
And so that he wasn't moving. But like I think it's one of the funniest things we got talking about dogs earlier being in the woods. He would be in the woods on the days you weren't here, and you saw big bucks last year in the woods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'd see a picture of him. An hour later, a deer come through on my camera. I see Sammy.
Yeah,
I see him all the time. I've got 14 pictures of him.
He's trying to go up there and find something. If the coons have been coming up there feeding, because he treed something at dark the other night down here in the bottom, and he took off running with it, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty good speed, but it ain't too fast. And he fell treed down there. And one of the good things was they got on me one night. I was down in the garage working on my tractor, and my wife, she gets worried a little bit. She's like, he's down there in the woods at dark. It's like, he's a dog, and that's what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And she said, well, he's got something treed. And I was like, well, he's 6 months old. That's great. I mean, 6 months old.
Just self-time when I retire, he's going to be good.
I pulled up my light, and I walked back there, and she was trying to call him, and I was like, don't call him. I was like, we'll just walk to the tree. And she kept calling him as I was walking through the woods. I got down to him, he was just proud as a peacock. He had treed something. and that's the thing, like, I think, like, for her to have that kind of a family situation. You got him, babe? I'm sorry, now they're getting singing in. But
there's old pride and joy.
Yeah, he is Simon's cousin.
Okay, his cousin. Okay.
And so they, my nephew is and his dad. I was talking about his my Uncle Raymond, and his son Danny. Danny's now in his 60s, and he really and truthfully has.
There goes howling.
Yeah, you can hear his big mouth, but you can hear him, and they've bred those dogs since probably the late 60s, early 70s, and they're particular with who they breed with.
Yeah.
And so now you're getting a good. I'm still getting a little
I'm
bit
glad
of
bucks
bloodline.
ain't that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just go and expect an animal to be good at something when you bred it with, a dud, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like, he's old. To find one of these dogs, Jill, that I talked about earlier, who's a great, great tree dog, I found her on Craigslist.
Really?
Man had put up an ad, squirrel dog, Feist. And he had gotten an ATV accident. He was an older gentleman and wasn't going to be able to ride the ATV and hunt no more.
Yeah.
And he sold her. I got her for $75. Brought her here, cut her loose, and we were she was a finished dog at that point. She's 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
And man, she was treeing squirrels, and we had a ball.
Yeah.
And I mean, the sad thing about it is they become such a family member. And I've said this. I've had dogs that I didn't hunt, and I've had dogs that I've hunted. And you're sad over both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all the two that I've had die here, they usually, if they come to this house, they die here. It'll rip your heart out because you really think of it like,
I was torn up over Simon.
Yeah.
And I just know him from pulling up here and him, howling at me.
I always would go to work and say, man, you know what? If they fire me from my job today, my family might not want to eat squirrel or coon, but we ain't going to starve.
Yeah.
Same way with a deer hunter.
Yeah.
I mean, at least I'm not going to starve. We could shut down we could shut down the interstates and all the
like
all the cows. Yeah, I mean all the cows and everything could get some kind of weird virus and we not be able to eat them. But I'll be able to go out and put food on my table. And I think that...
Don't jinx us. That sounds like something that'll happen.
I know. It's weird with everything going on. But I'll tell you, I think that's one of the things we've lost in public hunting.
Yeah.
But a lot of public see it as, it's cruel and unusual. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if it's not regulated, like we're doing, like I was saying, hunters are regulators. Yeah. And if they do it right, they're regulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're regulating the population. They're helping to keep down disease.
Yeah.
They're helping to do all this kind of stuff, and if they're able to eat the meat, give it to somebody else, whatever, then you're doing somebody a favor that one might not be able to afford it, can't go out and do it no more, might not have somebody that can get them that meat that they remember growing up and as a kid, and that's one of the things that, when hunting gets a bad rap, I always think about it. The people that's always talking bad about hunting, what are you going to do if something like that happens? Are you going to be begging me for food? And I mean, at the end of the day...
Well, the same people that'll tell you that about hunting will go to the grocery store and buy beef.
Yeah.
Well, that cow wasn't shot in the pasture in its natural habitat while it was eating corn.
Yes.
It was brought to a slaughter pen, and it's like, so...
I had the same conversation with somebody, and I don't care if you eat meat, vegetarian, I don't care what you do. Yeah. It don't bother me one bit. I don't think you're crazy for either. I love meat. But I say I do. I love it. I couldn't live without it. But I sat down at dinner with a person that only ate fish.
Only ate no vegetables?
They're pescatarians or something like that. They eat fish and vegetables. Oh, okay. But they didn't eat beef, pork, or anything else.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine eating salmon.
They didn't eat any hooved animals or anything that walked. Huh. And so I was like, okay, that's cool. Well, we're sitting there eating, and the first thing they order is a salmon steak. And I'm going, oh, that's cool. And they're like, I started talking about fishing. They're like, man, fishing is so rough. It's painful for them to get hooked. And I was like, how do you think they put that on the plate? They didn't go up there and say, hey, would you like to give your life to be on this menu? I was like, somebody had to go out and catch it. I said, so don't talk to me about fishing when all you eat is fish. If I stop fishing, you ain't going to have a supply chain. And you're going to start eating something else. And, I laugh about stuff like that.
But it's true.
But a lot of times people hear this jargon and they believe it without ever letting it come full circle and think, well, wait a minute, And that I always had a good quote about friendship and things like this. And I would always, talk about this. And one of my coaching heroes, Mike Leach, would always talk about stuff like this off the wall. And I always ask my students, I was like, tell me what kind of friends you have at the breakfast table. And they'd look at me and I'd say, okay, do you have chickens or do you have pigs? And they kind of look at me. I was like, okay, this is what you got to understand. When you sit down at breakfast the next time and you got eggs and sausage or eggs and bacon, that chicken could lay that egg and keep right on walking. Mm-hmm. That pig had to make a sacrifice to be at your breakfast. So what kind of friends do you want? Do you want a chicken that can just lay an egg and keep on walking? Or do you want somebody that's actually going to sacrifice their time to be a part of you and your life and your breakfast?
That's one of the best analogies I've ever heard.
And I said that's one of the things that I've always said about it. We was talking about eating and stuff, and that's one of the things I've kind of put to them. You're going to meet a lot of chickens in life that are going to be great for you, and they're going to be bad for you. Mm-hmm. But the pigs that have to make a sacrifice to be a part of your life and a part of what you're doing, and maybe even to nurture you, and that's who you're going to want to hang on to for the rest of your life. And so, even from, an animal making a sacrifice to be a part of what you're eating, you have to understand that there is a process that goes along with that. That's not always the best road or the easiest road or anything else, but those people that actually sacrifice their time, their effort, and even sometimes their lives.
Right.
They're somebody you want to be a part of your life. And so that's always, I usually write that up around Thanksgiving. Yeah. In my classroom about it. And then, I always tell them at Thanksgiving, a turkey is always a turkey. But sometimes a pig can be a ham. And so with a turkey, you always know what you're going to get. They're going to strut their stuff. They're going to talk the talk and walk the walk. I said, sometimes a pig can come into your life and be dressed just like a ham. But at the end of the day, they're still a pig. And that's one of the things that, you talk about, who you are and the friends you keep sometimes will really turn into who you become.
Yeah.
And so that's usually my two Thanksgiving wordisms from Coach Taylor about life.
Yeah, there you have it.
And I probably thought of them hunting or doing something.
I think of a lot of things. If I could write down all the songs, like song lyrics come to my mind while I'm hunting, I'd be touring somewhere.
If I could write down half the things he said to me, he'd probably be in jail.
Oh, me. Well, while you're on the, I guess the, I don't want to say deep side, but you said you had a verse.
Yeah.
We always end with one. The last one was given to us by Cy Robertson.
Oh, I seen you got to meet him.
Yep.
I didn't realize he was on Oxygen.
Yeah, he is. But I talked to him. I said, what's your life verse? And and we were talking about how it's overlooked with John 3:16, 17. It's overlooked because it's the Bible's it's a popular verse. But somebody asked me I don't know if they're saved. I don't know this person. I'm John 3:16. But that was just a cool tidbit. Last verse was from Cy.
You beat that.
That's tough because he's a pretty cool guy and he still got his teacup.
He's pretty cool. Yeah.
It is. My favorite verse, and I think I hold this one near and dear to me because of my Uncle Raymond Smith, that when I was 18, he sat down and he kind of said, hey, I got something I want to show you. And he opened his Bible. And my Uncle Raymond was a God-fearing man, and he was a man's man. In today's world, he was a man's man. And he was like a grandfather to me. I got my dad in my life that's always done so much for me and been a huge part of my life. And them two men in my life have always been a huge part, my Uncle Raymond and my dad. And I didn't know what my Uncle Raymond was going to talk to me about because we were sitting there and he was in his lazy boy and I was right next to him. Yeah, and he just opened it and I went up to visit him on a whim. And he said, I want to show you something. And being 18, he kind of looked at me and he said, I'm going to open up. And he opened up to the Old Testament. And it was actually something I had never read. And growing up in church all my life, nobody had ever really spoke on this or even brought it up. And you'll have to bear with me now because I got bifocals and I'm having to learn how to read with these things because I'm getting old. But he talked about David when David charged his son Solomon. And, David had been through the things that he had been through and some things that he caused in his life and had to overcome and ask forgiveness for and things. And it reads like this in 1 Kings chapter 2 verses 1 and 2. It says, when the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. And David says, I'm about to go the way of all the earth. He said, so be strong and act like a man. And this is coming from the King James. You can read it in a lot of other versions, but I like the way it says, be strong and act like a man. And you kind of wonder, what does it mean to be a man? And it says, observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him. Keep his decrees and commandments, his laws and regulations, as so written in the law of Moses. Okay, so that's what I've got to do. And here's the prize. Do this so that ye may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. And if you know the backstory of it is, Jesus talks about Solomon's wisdom, and the Bible says he was the wisest man to ever live. Now, he had his shortcomings too. But I had never heard anybody say, we talk about what does it take to be a man, in today's world, and there's a lot of things, but it lays it out right there. Show yourself a man in everything you do, and it outlines it right there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that stuck with me. And there's not probably a week or 2 weeks that don't go by that I don't think about that. Because he wasn't this bigger than life character. He would help anybody do anything, and
just a normal guy.
Just a normal guy, and raised a wonderful family. My Aunt Jean, his wife, is like a grandmother to me. She kept me when I was a kid, and I was almost like their first grandkid. But I will say, at 18 years old, I did not understand what the full length of that verse really meant. But 3 years later, I was married. 5 years later, I had 2 girls, and life hits you fast, and you start thinking, man, that is something that I can hold myself to as best as I possibly can. because it talks about keeping the commandments, His laws and decrees, and the things that we're supposed to do for each other as well as ourselves and those around us. And I think if we had more of that, if we really had more of that mindset, that this world would have a whole lot different vibe and really direction.
Talk about something that's lost today.
Yeah, and that's, we talk about what is lost. Well, being able to show these young men and even the kids coming up, like what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it.
Manhood is a lost art.
It's a lost art, and it's scary because we have, but for a long time that's always been something that verse has always stuck with me, and every time I think of him, even before he passed, I would always think of that moment, which there were so many more moments that I had with him, of him taking me fishing, and we fishing and letting me swim in a 5-gallon bucket when I was a little kid, thinking that was the biggest thing in the world, or helping him till the garden or whatever it was. That made the most lasting impact. And at his funeral, I got to speak, and I made reference to that, and I was like, this is what he has left me, and kind of charged me as a person, and that's something that I've always I've hung in there and said, that makes a huge impact, because I've never seen that verse, and I never heard it talked about.
Well, that's powerful. We appreciate you
for
letting us bum your place.
I'll tell you, we could talk for 4 more hours.
Yeah, so my camera's gonna die.
We'll definitely have you back on if you want to.
We'll do it again.
We'll try to go squirrel hunting.
Absolutely, that would be awesome.
This winter we'll go out.
Absolutely,
I got a place just 2 or 3 miles up the road we can go.
Good deal.
And
sure thing. We both got 22s.
Yeah, and I'll let y'all do the shooting, and I'll handle the dog because my eyesight ain't what it once was.
Well, then Aaron might have to do the shooting.
Both of y'all. Yeah,
but
we
appreciate you for being on.
Thank you guys for
appreciate
having me
you guys for listening.
Thank
if you're
you
even looking at me, don't forget to check out our hats on Instagram.
Yep.
Check out our YouTube, Spotify, all that. And everybody have a good night.